setting the stage for your Georgia Saturday. This is DawgNation Gameday, brought to you by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, Sir Charo's, Lassiter Tractor, the UGA Bookstore, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Now here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
Hello all and welcome to the DawgNation Gameday Show. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell. We're right here out in front of Kroger Field, as close as we could possibly get. Jeff, no more neutral site Clemson, no more FCS opponents till the end of the season. Today begins SEC play in a tale as old as time, Cats versus Dogs.
Kaylee, it's great to be here at Kroger Field. You know, all those weather forecasters earlier in the week, I don't want to hear it. You made me pack my rain gear. You made me bring it in the DawgNation team sled. We took the expedition, made it here, probably Atlanta to Lexington, a little over 6 hours. We had some stops, and right there, really right close to us, that is the dog walk the dogs have not gone through yet.
And even though I did not come prepared for sunny weather, I did come prepared for today's show. Here's what we have going on DawgNation Game Day. Starting with, we'll do our main storylines from today, clearly it being Georgia versus BVG, first SEC matchup, and a really telling availability report that could also change at 6 o'clock today. More on that later. We'll do a scouting report with Clemson. What did Kirby Smart have to say about the Cats this weekend? Then Connor Riley will come on to tell us more about that availability, what we can expect to see on the field today. Then another wonderful package put together by our very own Cody Chaffins. I think this one is going to make you guys laugh. Then Jeff and I will do our impact players. Then Davin Bellamy will join us once again to get his intake on what it's like playing in the SEC, on the road, in the first matchup, and his follow-up on what the Georgia defense is going to have to do today to impress him. Then we're going to do a little Sentell's Intel while we have Jeff Sentell here. Then we'll wrap it up with our Kroger dog walk. But let's start with this. Jeff, you saw the loss from Kentucky last week to South Carolina. Did that completely change your opinion of them and how this game would go down today?
I mean, it changed the national opinion, Kaylee. Remember how Kirk Herbstreit let out a little secret that game day was going to be here if the Cats would have taken care of business against South Carolina. And I mean, game day hasn't been here in ages. Probably back when Lee Corso had normal black hair. It's been about that long. And you've got now, they had to go to LSU, South Carolina, so a big missed opportunity for Kentucky. A lot of the local scribes around Kentucky were telling us that, you know, they really let the air out of the enthusiasm for the fan base. And you mentioned something earlier about BVG. It's very telling to me that two of the better players, the key players on Kentucky's roster, had to leave the Georgia football program in order to be a full-time starter.
I think what we thought earlier this week was that rain was going to have a significant impact on the game. Maybe not so much the winner and loser, but point spreads, injuries, stuff of that sort. But it's clear as can be out here. How does that change your perspective on how this game is going to play out?
I think rain was what Kentucky wanted to make it just a bloodbath, a trench fight inside the box. And now it's going to make it a little bit easier for Georgia to not only throw the ball around, but to also rush, get after Vandergrift, get after that Kentucky offensive line. That, I mean, I try to be nice on these shows, but I got to call it like I see it. It was abysmal last week for Kentucky. I believe they only had less than 60, 65 yards of passing offense. They rarely threw it. There's one telling stat, Kaylee. They were pressured on 15 out of their 22 dropbacks against South Carolina, and that's not good in any league you play in.
I think one thing for me that makes today's game more exciting, even though the opponent is not at the standard that we hoped they would be, is the fact that this is going to be the first SEC matchup for us. And even though the 12-team playoff changes the course of how this season is going to play out, I think every game still matters from here. I don't know if they necessarily have to display total dominance in this game, but the fact that we're at that point where the previous games don't matter, the road to the end starts right here at Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, it is the conference game. It is the conference gauntlet. And, you know, Kirby Smart was doing Kirby Smart things this week. He was saying, hey, every time we go up to Kentucky, it is very tough. It's always physical. They fight hard. Normally, we've got crazy weather involved in this game, Kaylee. Normally, the leaves are a lot more auburn. They're a lot more yellow, and it's a lot colder and the winds were whipping. I remember when we were here 2 years ago, Stetson Bennett couldn't throw the ball into certain pockets of the field because the wind was swirling in Kroger Field so bad, and you won't have any of that today.
So more on what Kirby Smart had to say about Kentucky later, but I do want to remind you guys that I'll tell you one thing that the University of Kentucky does not have and is very lacking is our good friends Jittery Joe's, our host for all home games, but more importantly, one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. Make sure you go and download that Jittery Joe's app. That way you can get 10% off on your first order as well as skip the line. I'm looking forward to being back in Sanford Stadium so we can be back at the Jittery Joe's downtown locations. And of course, you can't forget about those commemorative cans from the national championship years. You can order those online at jitteryjoes.com. So before we get Connor Riley on, I want to expand on what you had to say, and I want to start with this. Cody Chaffins is also going to touch on it later in his package, but Kirby Smart made it very evident in his early week press conferences that there is no easy road SEC game. This is what Kirby Smart had to say about the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've been up there that it wasn't just a battle. Like, I can't think of a time I've ever been to that stadium and played in a game that was like, well, that was easy. It's never easy up there. Never. It's never easy on the road in the SEC at all. And I don't know if people truly appreciate and respect a win on the road at Kentucky, how hard it is. They're well coached. They're really physical. They do a great job. I mean, they got a really good football team. So we will have our work cut out for us, not to mention 8 straight SEC games, I think it is.
So let me put this in perspective for you, Jeff. We've been talking about point spreads a lot today. Kirby Smart mentioned that Kentucky is one of the places where it's really, really difficult to play. Never in the Kirby Smart era, let me say first, the spread for this game is, I believe, UGA 24.5. Kirby Smart has never won by that margin in his era at Kentucky.
Yeah, that's big. And I mean, if Kaylee, it's kind of like, is Georgia really up? Kentucky is probably not what they thought they were. I mean, Kaylee, you can go back the last 14, 15 years. I looked at it. There's only been like 2 or 3 times where Georgia beat Kentucky by more than 24 points. So it's not just what's happening here at Kroger Field in the Commonwealth. It's also what's happening in Athens. I mean, Kentucky has always kind of earned the right of maybe the 3rd best team in the SEC East. Now it's no longer such a thing as the SEC East, but over the last 4 or 5 years with Coach Stoops, that's what they've been. Now they've always fallen short against the Dawgs. And, you know, this is a day, Kaylee, where I think the Dawgs are going to sit there. Even though they can't throw it, they can keep Arian Smith hot. They can work the ball around with Carson Beck's Heisman Trophy run. I think first and foremost, this is a gut check week where Kirby's going to stick that ball up in the box, and he's going to see how much they can move Kentucky around and get that run game for Georgia in SEC shape.
So as someone who's worked on the recruiting trail for years now, I know firsthand that you got the chance to watch the recruitment of Brock Vandagriff, especially with him being so close at Prince Avenue. Yeah. He's going to be the starter today, more than likely. What do you make of him as a quarterback? What did we potentially see from him today that maybe we didn't see last week against South Carolina?
Well, I think they're going to put him on the move and roll him out a lot. That's what you do when you can't block somebody. You get the pocket moving. And I think really Brock at his best is tough, he's accurate, he's physical, and he's very mobile. I think the thing that with Brock, most Georgia fans, I think it's right for them to say they want Brock to play like a Heisman Trophy contender in every game, except for this one. And your little backstory on Brock as you watch the Dogs tee off on him today, he deserves a big chunk of what Georgia built in the 2021 recruiting class. Folks, that's Amarius Mims, that's Brock Bowers, the great Brock Bowers. When Brock Bowers came on his own for visits to just watch Georgia play during that COVID year, the Vandagriff family hosted Brock. They were sitting together in the stands, and part of that falling in love process Brock had with Georgia had a lot to do with Brock Vandagriff and his family. Those guys were roommates when they were in college. It's going to be really weird, Kaylee, if you see Chase Chambliss come up with pressure and maybe get Brock Vandagriff on the ground, because that's one of his best friends in the whole world.
So, Jeff, I'm going to ask you to do a favor for me. I'm going to have you put the mic down. We have the Kroger dog walk going on behind us. I need you to go get a look and tell me your first thoughts while we get Connor Riley here on the Game Day Show. All right, Connor, talk to me so I can make sure that you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm right here, Kaylee. We're up here in the press box, a little over 2 hours from kickoff here now. And I think there's a lot of excitement to go see Georgia go out and play this game. Alabama took care of business earlier today, and I think there are a lot of Georgia fans excited and hoping Georgia does the same ahead of their matchup in 2 weeks.
All right, so if you're in Kroger Field right now, what are your immediate observations?
Beautiful day. I know there was some concern early in this week about the weather and the impact that might have. A few clouds, if that, but should be a great atmosphere tonight here for Georgia. And I hear Jeff talking earlier about just Georgia struggles with Kentucky. I'd point out that Georgia won by 4 touchdowns last year against Kentucky when they met in Athens. And with what you saw from Kentucky a week ago, with how poor their offensive line was, 22, I think, is the number right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia finds a way to cover that simply because of how poor this Kentucky offense might actually be.
So let's talk availability, because now that SEC play is beginning, the team is required to release an availability report, with that first one being this past Wednesday. Now they will have to release another one at 6 o'clock tonight. It will be the final one. But as of right now, 2 major players we know that didn't make the trip are Mykel Williams and Warren Brinson. Who has to step up in their absence?
Yeah, with Georgia short-staffed on the defensive line again, I think you look at guys like a Kristen Miller, Nazir Stackhouse, Kieran Ingram Dawkins, but those guys, Georgia's also going to want to limit how many snaps they play to try and prevent the wear and tear. So start looking at some of the younger guys. That's Gabe Harris, freshman Joseph Jonah Ajanye, and Jordan Thomas there. I think those guys are all going to play significant snaps tonight because we know Georgia's going to want to continue to rotate and try and keep a defensive line that is already pretty banged up as healthy as they possibly can. So we'll see ultimately what ends up happening, who ends up making the trip. They're not going to have, we know they're not going to have Jordan Hall. They're not going to have Mykel Williams. They're not going to have Warren Brinson. And so with those guys and them being banged up there, they're going to once again put a lot of stress on the healthy members of this defensive line, which is getting fewer and fewer every week, it seems.
So as we mentioned before, there will be one more availability report released at 6 o'clock. I think the big name that we're all looking for is Daniel Harris, who was arrested for reckless driving and other charges on Thursday night. I have to ask, do you expect to see him on this list? Is he going to be out playing on the field today, Connor?
I think that's the big question and wait and see in terms of the way things are going. He made the trip here to Kentucky. Georgia confirmed that. We'll see if he ends up playing. It could be a situation where we see him go through warmups and they ultimately not to put him out on the field. Harris was arrested on Thursday night. The police report alleges that he was traveling at 106 miles an hour at the time. Again, this is a Georgia program. It just seems to continue to keep happening. And, sure, reckless driving, the grand scheme of things, might not seem like a big deal. But with this Georgia program, it comes under a greater magnifying glass because not just of all the arrests that have happened this offseason with Georgia, I believe the Harris arrest is now the 5th different player to be arrested on driving-related charges. You also obviously have the unfortunate events in 2023 as well there. So all of these things continue to add up, and this is just another example that Georgia is having to deal with these circumstances going into their first SEC game.
So in his absence, it appears that true freshman Ellis Robinson, the number 1 rated quarterback in the class of 2024, would have to step up. Is that somebody that you're confident, if Daniel Harris doesn't play, that a freshman like Ellis Robinson is still going to be able to play at the highest level, even with very little experience, especially against an SEC opponent like Kentucky?
Yeah, I think this is a good situation to maybe ease Ellis into because, one, you do have Julian Humphrey back there who's going to start opposite Dalen Everett, has done so for the first 2 games. So you can allows you to ramp up gradually what Ellis can potentially do here. Ellis was the consensus number 1 cornerback recruit in the country. All accounts in spring and fall were that he was making progress there. And so he's got an opportunity to go out there and show that he can contribute at the cornerback position today. I think it also helps that he's going against a very shoddy offensive line in Kentucky and a team that a week ago against South Carolina really struggled to throw the ball. I don't think that they're going to have a whole lot more success this week because of their own offensive front. And that's going to allow Ellis to sort of get his feet more than wet and sort of get accustomed to playing SEC level football here in his first SEC road game as a true freshman.
So let's shift our attention to the offensive side of the ball. Last week against Tennessee Tech, we saw 6 different players get touchdowns. Now, when it comes to the offense, the playing calling today, do you think we'll see something similar where a lot of people are going to get the chance to celebrate in the end zone, or do you think it's going to be more limited players considering the opponent that we have now?
I think that they're going to try and spread the ball around. That is a hallmark of the Georgia offense under Kirby Smart here. I think also the fact that you have a bye week, you have the Alabama game on the horizon. They're not going to want to rely too much on one individual here. They're going to want to spread the ball around. Do 6 different players get in the end zone? I'm going to go ahead and bet the no on that this week, but I think you'll still see a healthy distribution of the football today and them not leaning too heavily on one player, even with the obvious jump up in competition going from Tennessee Tech to a still pretty good Kentucky defense.
All right, as you mentioned, next week, bye week, then we head into Alabama. What are the things that you want to see out of this Dogs team before going into the bye week?
Yeah, I think the big things: start fast today, get healthy, stay healthy through this game, and take care of business. If Georgia doesn't win by 22.5 points in this game, I don't think that's the end of the world. And we've seen Georgia in this spot before where, they have big games on the horizon. You think back to the last time they came to Kentucky where they already had the SEC East wrapped up. I think that there's maybe a little self-preservation mode that they go into. So they go out, look sharp, start well, play well early, and then just sort of sit on the ball in the second half. I think that's going to be an A+ day for Kirby Smart in terms of what he's looking for.
And Connor, before I let you go, will you publish an availability report on DawgNation.com, the final one after 6?
We will have a travel roster of everyone who made the list and everyone who made the trip, obviously, to Lexington. And then within that, the availability report will be updated as well. Xavier McLeod was the only player that wasn't listed as out that was on the availability report yesterday. He was listed as questionable. So we'll see if he's given the available or game time decision distinction before this game against Kentucky.
All right. Thanks, Connor. Dog Nation, make
Thanks,
sure
Kaylee.
to check out Connor's articles on DawgNation.com at halftime and postgame, as well as our Dog Nation YouTube page to see all the postgame press conferences. With that, before we bring Jeff Sentell back, we asked our very own Cody Chaffins to put a package together. We let him have the creativity on these, and I'll say he certainly got creative with this one. Kirby Smart was, without a doubt, asked a lot about Kentucky this week, and I have to say, just as he is as a coach, he was pretty consistent in his responses.
Kirby Smart has sounded like a broken record this week.
Physical. They're a physical team. They're well coached. They're really physical. Most physical game we've played in most years. Very disciplined, very physical, preparing for super physical game. We got to prepare for a tough, really physical game. It's never easy up there.
While Smart has not lost to Kentucky as Georgia's head coach, he doesn't really enjoy playing them, especially in Lexington.
That's a really tough place to play when you go there, as you can see from every time we've played there. I don't think we've been up there that it wasn't just a battle. Like, I can't think of a time I've ever been to that stadium and played in a game that was like, well, that was easy.
And if you think Kirby's harping on how tough things get in the Bluegrass is new, let's walk back to 2020 after a 14-3 slugfest on Halloween.
Every time we play them, it's a physical war. It's just tough. They play really stout along the offensive and defensive lines.
Jump ahead to 2 years ago, 2022, a 16-6 Dogs win on a frigid afternoon.
When you play Kentucky, you better strap it on. And we talked about that. We talked about it. You weren't going to play the same Kentucky that Vanderbilt played. You're going to play a different Kentucky. And they did a good job, and the conditions limited themselves to a limited number of possessions.
And the same thing rings true this week. The Dogs know that last week's pummeling by South Carolina doesn't mean that Kentucky won't present the same old challenges.
They're just as dangerous whether they won or lost that game, in my opinion. I don't get into the whole, we're going to prepare the same way regardless of what happened in that game. A lot of things went wrong quickly for them in that game, and it snowballed in some ways.
No doubt Kirby Smart will have his team ready to be tough, and, well, let's just let Kirby tell us one more time.
Physical game.
For Dog Nation, I'm Cody Chaffins.
And welcome back to the Dog Nation Game Day Show. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell outside of Kroger Field, and it is time for our Impact Players of the Day. I'm going to start. I feel really good about this one. There has only been confirmation all day. We got both the number 11s on our list today. It's going to have to start with Arian Smith. I feel like he's just on the verge of that breakthrough game that we've all been waiting to see.
Knocking on the door.
Yes.
Knocking on the door.
Knocking on the door. We caught a glimpse of it last week versus Tennessee Tech, but Cole Spear actually spoke about Arian Smith this week. Here's what Cole Spear had to say on Arian Smith.
maybe harder than anybody in the receiver room that I know of, and he was maybe had a chip on his shoulder coming back for his 5th year. Just wanting to get better, really wanting to lead the room, and he's done a very, very good job about that.
Nobody works harder than him in the receiver room, plays with a chip on his shoulder. And listen, I'm scrolling through Twitter today, and they always release the Georgia game day trailers that the university puts out, and I always pay attention to the narrator. Narrator was none other than Arian Smith. They want him to have a 5-star performance out here, and I think it would be perfect to come in this first SEC matchup.
So one thing Kirby always says, and you pay attention to his messaging a lot, Kaylee, is he said, I don't think there's ever been a greater example of growth since I've been here at Georgia of one player. And guys, I remember Arian Smith when he came out. He came out from a very small school. For his senior year, he transferred to Lakeland in Florida, which is a powerhouse school. But he was very raw. All he could do was run. And I think we've all seen his growing pains. We've seen the bigs, the big plays. We've seen the highs. We've seen the lows. But, Kaylee, here's what I think's happening. Georgia's going to get him the ball where an average game is about 4 catches for 50 yards. They're going to keep feeding him. They're going to get 1 or 2 breakout games where he goes for 150, 160. And then you're going to have a body of work in those stats for Arian Smith to pair with, I don't know, a 4.19 at the NFL Combine. Just some sick, jaw-dropping speed on display. And he's going to jack up his draft stock considerably.
So on the defensive side of the ball for me, once I saw the availability report, knowing Mykel wouldn't come here, obviously someone has to step up in that place. And that person for me is going to be Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. The defensive line, I don't want to say that they've struggled because that's not necessarily the case, but the fact that they haven't been able to stay healthy through these 3 games, it's the only thing that can happen is for the guys that we do have to step up. Someone who's a veteran on this team knows this defense better than anyone else. I think with Mykel out today, he's the sure thing on the defense for us.
Well, Kaylee, you mentioned it. Georgia's strength is going to be hopefully its defensive line this year. It is their bigs that's going to make the difference. And I think Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is a perfect example. Kaylee, he's been hurt most of his career at Georgia. Yeah. And, he is now benefiting. He is now healthy. And sometimes the football gods and football karma reward a guy because Georgia is nicked up on the line, and that's giving him more opportunities to shine. Folks, the way Georgia's defensive line plays its best is they get Xavier McLeod healthy, they get Jordan Big Baby Hall healthy, and they get all those pieces healthy, and they rotate more bodies into the line where Nazir only takes 30 snaps. Brinson gets healthy, and then everybody gets optimum effort, optimum strain, and the defensive line looks a lot different.
Absolutely. Now, walk me through your 2 impact players. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. You've got Trevor Etienne, missed game 1, had a great performance in game 2, but we didn't really need to see him in the second half. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of him today.
I think Georgia's going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to win the physical battle in the contest. And, Kaylee, let's face it, Etienne had 6 carries last week. He probably has 12 to 15, 16, 17 carries tonight. I think that means he goes over 100. I think he looks very good and makes all those SEC Nation highlights tomorrow morning and tonight. I think he has a big game because I think Georgia's offensive line, provided they can move around number 0, Deion Walker, who is an absolute dog in the middle. Georgia probably wanted to bring him in there in the transfer portal. But I think Georgia wants to show it can bludgeon, batter, and really just run up and down the field on Kentucky.
Does Trevor Etienne get his first touchdown in a Dawgs uniform today?
I think so. Maybe even multiple tutties, Kaylee.
Ooh, I would hope so. All right, let's move to the defensive side of the ball. I know Connor Riley is like cheering on the inside right now. Defensive side of the ball, Jalen Walker, who's been an absolute monster for this Georgia team. I mean, I really think about the performance that he had at Clemson, the depth that he brings to this room, but also the versatility, being able to play outside, inside. I like this pick in Jalen Walker from you.
First of all, Kaylee, got 2 things. I'm not trying to sound like a wrestling guy here, but I'm going to call out everybody in the comment section. And if what I say matters, can I get an amen from the comment section? Because here's why I think. Last week, Kentucky bruised up, pass rush heat. South Carolina had a freshman edge do that. Now, who's going to do that for Georgia with Mykel Williams out? I think it's Jalen Walker. I think he's the guy that he led the team in sacks last year. He's the guy that's going to help turn on the heat. I think Damon Wilson is another really good guy. But all of this great football, technical scouting stuff, I could tell you, because I don't think they're quick enough on the tackles to deal with Jalen Walker coming around the end. But that's all great football guy stuff. But Kaylee ordered some food on the way up here. We stopped. We had to dive in and dive out. And we had to make a pit stop somewhere around London, Kentucky.
Some of the best food I've ever had, by the way.
We're following the Brandon Adams Bible of broadcasting here, is we're not giving out free plugs.
No.
But I will say this. Kaylee's little order tag came to her after she paid, and it was the number 11. And she said, Jeff, this has got to be an omen because you picked number 11, Jalen Walker, and she picked number 11, Arian Smith. So if those two dogs go off, you know it was all preordained by a food order in London, Kentucky.
All right, one more thing on impact players, kind of a surprise. You have not proved me wrong yet in any of your freshman breakout players. There's a good chance we might get to see a lot of Ellis Robinson today. But for you, who could be that freshman player that stuns us again?
I think we saw a little bit, Kaylee, last week, a little bit of a glimmer. And I'm talking about Jordan Thomas, the All-American defensive lineman out of New Jersey, a great program. Kaylee, I saw him coming through the dog walk. He looks big. He looks like he hasn't eaten a week, and I think he wants to eat this week. And all those injuries on the defensive line, I think it opens up more opportunity for Jordan Thomas to make a play on the interior. And I really like him as my pick to click for this week.
Absolutely. Now, in just a second, we're going to have Davin Bellamy on. But first, this is the DawgNation Game Day.
Nothing makes a house feel more like a home than quality windows. So trust the professionals at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll equip your home with energy-efficient windows and doors just right for you. Schedule your free in-home, no-pressure consultation. Get product samples, installation options, and a free quote. Log on to PellaGA.com and visit our new Experience Center in Duluth. Tell them Brandon Adams sent you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
DawgNation Game Day. It's sponsored by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, and the UGA Bookstore.
And we welcome in Davin Bellamy to DawgNation Game Day. Absolutely loved having him on last week, and he'll be on the post-game show with Brandon Adams. Davin, glad to have you back. I got to get your insight. Kirby Smart said it this week that there is no easy games on the road in the SEC. How difficult is it truly?
I mean, I've played in some tough, places. And, Kentucky is one of those places, kind of like Kirby Smart said, they're tough, they're physical, and you have the number one team in the nation coming in town. So, back when I was at Georgia, I used to always say, the Lakers are in town, so everybody's coming out. So it's going to be their Super Bowl, and it's just going to be really tough.
Okay, so now what about the week leading up to that first SEC game? You're going from an FCS opponent to an opponent like Kentucky. How is practice different, and how is the locker room different, most importantly?
Well, I think, the players are a lot more focused. Your season starts now. We had a big win, against Clemson, and then we had to win last week against, Tennessee. But we all know that you have to win the SEC to get where you want to get to. So just this week is, everyone's focus because the season starts now. And I'm pretty sure they have the speakers going off, at practice to prepare the offense for how loud it's going to be.
So last week you told us that maybe you needed to see a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. Now with an opponent like Tennessee Tech, it's hard to garner everything that you potentially want to see. What is it that you need to see out of this Georgia defense today to give you the clarity that you need?
Well, we've been stopping the run. That's what we do. But I think, today, the first, game on the road, tough opponent, being the SEC, defense travels and defense wins you championships. And one thing a coach always told me is, when the defense is on the road, it's quiet. So there is no home and away for the defense. Your defense always travels. So tonight, I want to see us get after the passer, a little better, just cause more havoc in the backfield. And we're going to have to really lean on them, for this win. This is a big test to see if we have that national, championship caliber, defense.
Hey, Davin, this is Jeff Sentell, man. I wanted to jump in and ask you a question. I think it's a good thing for you to talk to the viewers and the audience about this, because one of the most popular things you get is especially the way that South Carolina was able to harass the quarterback last week. And one of the things I always hear from fans is, why don't the Dogs turn the edge guys loose? And I know it's football. It's Kirby Smart's scheme about, being sound in your gap. Works really well for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. Can you just explain to the audience, what it's like to be coached up in that scheme where you just don't pin your ears back and rush all the time in the Georgia defense? Can you share your view on that?
Right. No, and I always spoke about that. Even when I was there, I think the best season I had in sacks was around, 6.5, but, that number could have been 10, but the way we do it is we like to attack, the offensive line set. So Georgia believes in, everybody eating. Your defensive tackle may have 4 sacks, your edge may have 5, your linebacker may have 4. We just like to exploit the weakness of the offense, but sometimes that gets in the way when you have those dynamic edge rushers and those guys that, potentially can go top 10 in the draft, like Mykel. I usually don't like to see him in the A gap being a distraction for a safety to get a sack. So, that's kind of where you're at right now is, do you focus on one guy, let him, disrupt the game, or do you try to attack the way, the offensive line is setting? So it's a balance that the coach definitely has to find.
Davin, I feel like obviously when Georgia meets a lot of these teams in the SEC, that functions just fine. But maybe when they meet up against a C.J. Stroud or a guy that can extend plays, I think that's what Georgia's defense, needs to get a little bit better at, needs to show a little more. I don't know if we'll ever see a 15-sack guy under Kirby Smart. Maybe we will in the playoff era when we have 16, 17 games. But, I think in those cases, if you've got a dynamic edge, sometimes you got to let him do what he does best and try and turn loose and go harass that quarterback.
You definitely got to let him go, man. And you kind of made a great point. You got the C.J. Stroud game, and even with Joe Burrow, we tried to do a lot of 3-man rushes and, bring the safeties off the edge. But, I'm not a big fan of the 3-man rushes because you give great quarterbacks too much time. You want that ball to come out in at least, 2.5, 2 seconds. But when it's only a 3-man rush and now you got safeties trying to get to the quarterback when really their job is to cover, it kind of gives the quarterback too much time. And that always kind of hurts us, when we play those top QBs. And the best way to stop the best quarterbacks in college football is to get them on the ground and affect them as much as possible. And sometimes when you have those guys like Mykel, who is a top 10 pick, sometimes you just let them go, wreck the game until the offense says we have to completely just take him out.
Davin, I got one more for you, man. Obviously, we can talk ball all we want, and I think that was a good scheme point we got to jump into right there. But we got to add a little bit of color, a little bit of fun. Now, Davin, when you think of your games against Kentucky and all the battles you had, is there one memory, doesn't even have to be a play, but what sticks out in your mental Rolodex about going up against the Kentucky Wildcats?
Oh, man, how sore you are on that flight home. We always came in as, the favorite when I was there, and they always have been a physical team. I guess the memory that I can have is, and that was the first time I got my bottom lip busted. I just was on the plane with a fat lip and body sore, and we got the win, but it was tough. And that just is a testament to how, physical they are, in the Bob Stoops team. So it's always just a grudge match with them. It's not going to be a lot of explosive plays, man. It's going to be a game that's going to be played in the box and who's going to give in first.
All right, Davin, always appreciative of your insight. Can't wait to see you on the DawgNation post-game show with Brandon Adams immediately following the game.
Likewise. I really appreciate you guys. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. You got to give a go Dawgs back, obviously, when it's a guy like Davin.
How about go Davin? How about go Davin?
We can give a go Davin, too.
He's a good dude.
That's
I'm glad
cool,
he's part of our team.
Yeah, I am, too. I didn't know he was still on the call. We are happy to have you. All right, so it can't be a complete DawgNation Game Day show if we didn't get some Sentell's intel. But since this isn't a home game or neutral site and we're not hosting, this is the angle I want to take. I feel like in the post-NIL transfer portal era, this is the first time that Georgia's going to face a team with former players who can be key factors in the outcome of the game, with quarterback Brock Vandegrift, who's going to have to control the tempo for the Wildcats, and JDJ playing a big role on that defense. I do feel like this is the first game where we're going to have to see our former players make a real impact for the other side, and it's a weird feeling almost.
Kaylee, I don't know how it'll feel. I'd love to hear what everybody in the comment section thinks, but what's it going to be like when JDJ tackles Brinson Robinson or something like that, or gets to Carson Beck even? That's going to be so weird. Or then flip side of that, when Chaz Chambliss or Damon Wilson or Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, takes a hard sack on Brock Vandegrift. It's football. This is a physical game. I mean, these guys made lifelong bonds and lifelong memories. So I know once the whistle stops, the clock hits 0, it's all good again. Heck, Chaz, I know, will be in Brock Vandegrift's wedding one day, vice versa. They'll both be in Brock's weddings. But like when all that happens, I think a lot of these guys, no matter what they do in Kentucky, they're going to be dogs at heart.
So who does the transfers benefit more? This Georgia team that knows Brock Vandegrift better than any other program in the country, or a team like Kentucky that has Brock Vandegrift that's known the ins and outs of the Georgia offense and more than likely the Georgia defense and their strengths and their weaknesses?
Well, I mean, film can tell you what the strengths and weaknesses are, all the insight that Brock Vandegrift has gleaned. I don't know if he'll be able to attack and he'll be able to gas Georgia, because the people around him are at a matchup disadvantage with what the Dogs have. He probably knows, I'm not going to throw that ball anywhere near Malachi Starks. I've seen him get me like that over and over. But, I think that's the main thing you want to look at with these matchups like that. The other thing about it, Kaylee, let's be sure about and talk about the swinging gate of the transfer portal. London Humphreys is going to be in this game. I expect him to make plays, especially Colby Young. But let me give you another sleeper to throw out here, as these Wildcats think that they might have something cooking tonight in Lexington.
Yeah, so much for a basketball
school. Dominic Lovett. I think, Georgia and Carson Beck likes to spread the ball around. He hasn't had a game where he's went off yet, and I think tonight could be one of those games.
Yeah, so even though we're not going to have the Kroger Dog Walk, we did get a first-hand experience this morning of seeing the Dogs. Actually got to see them in the team hotel by total coincidence, by the way.
Welcome into Kroger's coverage of the Dog Walk, which today happens to be taking place at Kroger Field. The Dogs making their way into Commonwealth Stadium. Let's get ready to take a look at that here right now. And the first man through is going to be Georgia coach Kirby Smart, giving out some high fives and some fist bumps to Georgia fans along the way. He's got his earbuds in and he's ready to go. He's going to have Georgia staffers following closely behind him. You see defensive line coach Trey Scott. He is walking by. You see Scott Sinclair, the strength coach. You see Tate Radlich coming by. You see Jonas Jennings, one of the player personnel directors. He is walking by. The Georgia Bulldogs making their way in. Wide receiver Arian Smith. Offensive lineman Xavier Truss. Offensive line coach Stacy Serrell's coming in. An amazing crowd has gathered here with what has turned out to be gorgeous weather for today's game. Obviously threat of rain and perhaps high winds. Right now, we're not really seeing any of that. You see Jordan Hall coming through, injured, not able to play today, but he's here. Get a chance to see Dylan Fairchild walking by. To the delight of many of these Georgia fans, Dylan Fairchild on hand. Jarvis Jones, here comes Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. He's looking good as always. Chaz Chambliss coming by shortly after him. I'm getting a look at Smile Mondin walking in here right now. Cannot overstate the collection of fans who are on hand, gathered all around here. You see Christian Miller coming right in your field of vision there. An amazing crowd, an amazing reception, almost feeling like a home game here today with Georgia on hand. A great hug that Glenn Schumann extends to some of the player families. Mike Bobo, Georgia offensive coordinator. He walks by. David Cooper, the UGA recruiting staffer. He's coming by there. Georgia getting ready for the Kentucky Wildcats. An amazing reception here as the Dogs continue to roll through. Of course, don't forget, getting ready for all your game day party needs. Our friends at Kroger have you on all of that for the watch party, the tailgate, everything else. Party platters, food on the grill as Branson Robinson comes in the cooler, everything else. You've got that right there at your local Kroger. We appreciate you being a part of the pregame coverage right here from Kroger Field at Commonwealth Stadium. Don't forget to join us after the game for our DawgNation postgame show there as well. Kaylee, Mansell, these Georgia players are still filing on through, but we're going to get ready to send it back to you as you keep your eye on everything going on with Georgia ahead of the big game against Kentucky later on today.
Thanks, Brandon. So we were actually right outside of the dog walk. I have to say the Dogs traveled pretty well this game.
They did. You saw a lot of fans. You saw a lot of people checking out the outfits. I mean, literally you saw, like, obviously you see determination, but you also saw smiles when they meet their family. And one thing about dedication, Kaylee, is we probably rolled up here about 4:15, 4:30, something like that. And the dog walk was already kind of thick. Brandon had to find a really good spot. He had to be cheesing a little bit. He had to kiss a couple of babies for him and our Cody Chaffins to get that vantage point that you guys got right there.
So as we wrap up the show, I guess my biggest question to you is, and it was similar to Clemson, the Dogs still stand at number one. Kentucky got absolutely demolished by South Carolina last week. Do the Dogs have to dominate in today's game, or could they get by with 10 points, 14 points as they head into bye week?
Good question, Kaylee, because it's always kind of style points right now with those early rankings, and it gives all those talking heads on all those shows stuff to talk about. I think you got to do two things. One, you got to kind of do what at least South Carolina did to Kentucky. You know, that would be 31-6. That's a 25-point spread. That's the spread. I think a Georgia win anywhere in that 17-plus range will do it, but folks, let's get real here. Let's get really real here. Georgia's going to play 15, 16, maybe 17 games this year. You just want them to advance with no more Warren Brinsons, no more Mykel Williams situations, because that defensive line's pretty thick, but it can't take more than one or two guys going down before it thins out a lot.
So when all is said and done at the end of this game, what's the biggest thing you want to see out of this Dogs team?
I think you just want to see the way I think the Georgia program is built right now. I think it's a question of who's going to be the guy this week. There's so much talent. People want to spread it around. Even Davin Bellamy said they'd like to make sure everybody eats. And I think this is a game for guys that maybe haven't gone off outside of Carson Beck, because he's going to get the ball as a trigger man to everybody. You're going to see different Dogs step up. This is going to be their game to remember. And I think that's what you need to do to have a season where you don't squeeze too much out of a certain player or two each and every week. You show off the depth of your team and your cast of characters. And Kaylee, I have one more thing to say to you. I have two things from the front lines here at Kroger Field. Number one, I'm seeing Kentucky ladies, young and old, with blue lipstick. I don't understand that. I'm going to need your scouting breakdown on that. And number two, shout out to the Dog fans. They had to go really deep here. I saw some. I couldn't make out the entire sign, but they had something referencing Oakland beating Kentucky last year in the NCAA basketball tournament. That was a dagger to the John Calipari era here at Kentucky. And you saw some Dog fans, some creative Dog fans that got their PhD in trolling, bringing up Oakland University basketball. It was something like, if you thought Oakland University was tough, wait till you see them Dogs today.
Absolutely. I love that kind of trolling because it's schools like Kentucky and Auburn that when things go bad, it's a constant reminder that they're a basketball school. And the Dogs are here to remind you that
They're
not a football school, maybe not a basketball school either. Now, as far as the blue lipstick goes, no judgment passed. Wear whatever you feel confident in. Blue is not necessarily my color, but I mean, hey, more power to you. If you have the confidence to go out and wear it, good for you.
That's a good moment. That's a good girl power moment. Go for you. I like that.
Yeah, women supporting women.
That's right. That's right.
All right, with that, Dawg Nation, thank you for joining us on DawgNation Game Day. We've got about an hour and 15 minutes till kickoff. Go get your last-minute food in. If you need to go pick some up from Kroger, now is the time to do so. But with that, we will see you immediately after the game with Brandon Adams for DawgNation postgame. Go get your drinks in, and we'll see you guys after the game.